Okay, I'm going to call to order. Is that being too loud? We're going to work on that piece. Policy ADD, put it after the superintendent's report. Are you asking that this be an agenda, action item or an information item?
Action item.
I'll second that. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions? Dr. French?
So I'm curious why we're putting this on the agenda. Do we have new information that's relevant to the policy? This is the first time I heard about it. So I'm just wondering what information that we have that might change our plan.
Okay, it's for discussion. So it's not necessarily a new item, new information.
It's for discussion, but you said you wanted to take action. So
Yes.
that sounds like a bigger deal than just information. And do we have new information?
So we'll have a report after the superintendent's report, as we normally will get at all of our meetings in reference to DHAC and to the guidelines. So as we go into discussion, we can talk about whatever new items that is reported here today.
Okay, I'm frustrated that this wasn't brought to board members before the meeting with
Well, again,
information that we could review.
Absolutely. I understand your position, but also understand the position that each board member have the right to ask for an addendum to the agenda, and it's either voted up or down at that point. So I do understand what you're saying, but also our policy does allow that to happen.
And I believe that the board has to approve whether it gets,
Correct.
I'm adding it because I want it there, but I also understand that the board can vote against that
Correct.
option and
Correct.
the agenda sits as is.
Correct.
Right, it takes to add something that today at the agenda, during the meeting, we need 2/3, a supermajority, so it would take, how many, do we have 9 of us here? We have.
I don't believe Ms. Coakley's on.
Is Ms. Coakley on? No, okay, so somebody else can do the math. and just keep going.
Just take one.
Hey,
Okay.
Kate. Hey, Kate,
Hey.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I missed Eric's motion. I heard the discussion, but I didn't hear what it was that we were trying to add. Can somebody
Okay.
repeat that, please?
Yep, I can. So for you and Lauren both, Reverend Mack has made a motion. Ms. Coates has seconded it to amend the agenda to discuss and take potentially, but it'd be an action item, to discuss policy ADD, and he'd like to do it after the superintendent's report. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Do we have any other questions on that motion? Okay, so are we voting on just that motion, or are we voting on the whole agenda?
Voting on that motion, yeah, you vote on the agenda to add that.
Okay, so everybody clear on the motion?
So a yes vote adopts it and adds it, a no vote sends it back to the table for adoption.
Right.
Okay, everybody please vote. Ms. Green, are you voting on your computer or do you want to voice vote?
I don't see the ability to vote on the computer, but I vote yes.
Okay, vote yes, okay. Okay, that motion passes and the agenda is approved. As amended, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 2, public comments. Ms. Waters?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Darby. For in-public comments today, we do have, or excuse me, for public comments today, we do have a couple of in-person and some online. So first, we'll deal with the in-person comments, and we have Francis Baylat.
Hi, I'm sorry, I had to hang up from a meeting. It's hard to get down here all the time and miss work and make these comments, but I think it's important. As you know, I'm a strong proponent of mental health supports, wraparound supports in schools. And I'm here to ask you to move with a sense of urgency to provide those supports as they were requested by parents and community members through the ESSER survey responses. I believe it was either first or second as the priority. In D10, we don't have the mental health supports we need in our schools right now, and our students are suffering. I've been watching this process with ESSER 3 and Reimagine drag on and on and on for weeks and months now. Meanwhile, we have money just sitting on the table, which could pay for mental health support services in the classrooms, which should exist right now, today. But instead, we're just going on and on and on and talking about creating additional committees and layers of bureaucracy and this and that. But the fact of the matter is our kids need this now, today. As you probably know, over the past decade, the suicide rate for children aged 10 to 14 has tripled. Age 10 to 14 suicide rate. It continues to climb. And you guys have the tools, you have the resources, and you have the ability to do something about it. And I need to understand, what are you waiting for? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Gary McAuliffe.
My name is Gary McAuliffe, and I appreciate this opportunity. As in January, I discussed 5 recommendations with CCSD. They included improve the meeting room and meeting administration, improve the public comment period, identify consultants that are used by CCSD, provide better information on the curricular review process, and standardize board meeting times. I provided these recommendations in a letter to the board, and I hope they will be considered and acted upon. My third recommendation had to do with consultants. I have learned of various organizations that might be providing consulting services to CCSD. I've seen the names, the Council on Great City Schools, the National School Board Association, Coastal Community Foundation, Coalition of Kids, and Panorama Education. My concern is simple. If CCSD is paying consulting organizations, the extent and nature of that consulting should be available to the public. I hope the board concurs in and acts on this recommendation. I have one more subject, and that is ESSER funding. I've submitted questions to the board and about ESSER funding, and I look forward to responses. As I see it, ESSER funding is $163 million, which represents approximately 26% of the annual budget of CCSD. This is a one-time funding. I question how it will be used without creating unfunded future commitments. And as of the 71 proposals that I have seen received, it appears to me that none of the schools have been invited to provide proposals. The ESSER funding appears to be a very complicated process, and it needs careful and consideration. I believe adequate attention should be paid to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Heather Meerman.
Hello, my name's Heather Merman. I'm a parent with 2 children in Charleston area public schools. Thinking about the ESSER funds, I have seen the 71 proposals that you got from third parties. And as a parent, I'd like to see what the schools themselves would like. And I have not seen that they've even been asked where they would like this money to go. I moved here 20 years ago, so my kids have gone from kindergarten through, now they're in high school. And schools have been asking for the same things since I've moved here. They want more teachers so they can have smaller class sizes, better pay for teachers so that they can attract more quality applicants, dedicated planning periods, child psychologists and social workers in the schools. And nothing gets done. The schools know what they need. They don't need conveners or community hosts or innovation management organizations to find this information out. They know what they need. And I would request that you ask them and that their proposals become available to the public. Also, it disturbs me looking at the CCF website and for the reimagined schools. I found that they have place-based impact investing, where people can invest money in a fund that works in the community to basically make them money. And that seems a bit of a conflict of interest in running schools like they wish to do. So I ask that to be investigated as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Joy Brown.
Right now, there are 2 ESSER 3 proposals out of the 71 that total $75 million. The one from the Coastal Community Foundation is a vague, unproven framework that has been disruptive to our schools and met universal outcry against it. The other, the Charity Foundation, is asking $43 million, and they want to hire multiple layers of administration throughout their foundation and other groups. And the proposal asks for Charity, which is run by Reverend Nelson Rivers, who incidentally works for Charleston Shared Future, a group that our interim superintendent also is affiliated with, gets to give out funds to other third parties. So they will be a go-between. These groups, while some of them are very good, they do great work, they should have asked for these funds themselves and not to get their money through a third party. Now, I don't blame these groups for asking. I'm disappointed with CCSD and the board for not doing their jobs and getting these funds where they need to go. This has all been a distraction. Right now, there were ESSER town hall meetings where our families asked for mental health counseling. I serve on the D10 constituent board, and while I cannot speak for my other constituent board members, I can tell you personally, it pains me so much to see the mental health anguish that our students are going through, and nothing is being done by you all. They have asked for help. There are no mental health counselors at most of our high schools. That is unacceptable, and we need you to do better. Stop being distracted by these $1 million money grabs, and please do your job and get our students the help they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. The remainder of the comments were submitted online. They were primarily around the mask mandate and the Heritage Keeper sex education curriculum. And that's that for public comments. Ms. Garvey.
Okay, thank you very much.
We didn't have, we didn't have her at the time that we started. Yeah,
Okay,
you can
go
go
ahead.
ahead. That's Tara Wood. Yes, go ahead. Are you Janine Nagrodsky? Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I ran to get here today. Literally ran. It was hard to get here at 1 o'clock. Anyway, thank you. So, and as I was on my way here, I noticed that you added the mask mandate to the agenda next week. So I came here today to ask you to call a special meeting. And I'm still going to ask you, call a special meeting this week. Let's end this mask mandate. And I was curious if anybody watched the Super Bowl yesterday, because we had over 70,000 people in that stadium and I didn't see anybody wearing masks. And so anyway, and I know you've received plenty of information that proves there's essentially 0% efficacy in wearing surgical cloth or N95 masks to prevent the spread of viruses. However, there is several scientific studies from Stanford University to Brown University that proves the harm in long-term mask wearing, especially to our children. And we know that these masks they're not magic shields, y'all, to prevent the spread of viruses. They are not. Okay. There are several countries all over the world that have ended all of their COVID restrictions and mandates because they do not work. They do not work. And never in our history have we punished children to protect adults. I want that to sink in for a minute. We have never punished children to protect adults. It is our job to protect them, and they are not at risk. And I don't understand why, CCSD was asking our children to bear this burden for a few scared adults, especially since we know that COVID-19 is less dangerous than the flu. And I just feel like you're causing our children to feel shame and guilt if they do not comply. And coercion is not consent. And please stop saying that whoever thinks that children are so resilient, because none of us knows what it's like to be a child, to be masked all day in school and trying to learn their schoolwork and to learn to socialize and to learn to make friends. These mouths, they play a huge role in nonverbal communication. And our kids are going 78 hours a day right now without seeing a smile. And that is dehumanizing. And I know that this mandate does not represent the majority of the people. You know how I know this? Because when the schools don't have the mandates, most of the kids and teachers aren't wearing masks. When I go to restaurants and stores, hardly anybody's masked. When I go to my church, there might be 3 people in a mask. I'm serious. So I know this is not representing the majority. I don't know, maybe the other side is louder, but it's not representing the majority. I promise you this. So anyway, and the so-called ranges from DHEC, they are arbitrary numbers and they're not based on science. There's counties all over our state that have the same mid to high range numbers and they aren't masking. As a matter of fact, y'all, I cannot find one county in South Carolina that is masking the kids. Okay, I can't. I mean, y'all can tell me, but nobody's masking their kids, and they've got the same DHEC mid-range. So again, that's not based on science. So I say, please let our kids and teachers get back to normal and enjoy school again. They deserve it. This is not the new norm. And our country we're ruining a generation, and I wish we were on the right side of history. When we look at the COVID-19 pandemic through the lens of history, I believe it will be clear that we betrayed our children. The risk of this pandemic were never to them, but they were forced to carry the burden of it. It is enough. It's time for a return to normal life and put an end to the bureaucratic policies that aren't making society safer, but are sacrificing our children's mental, emotional, and physical health. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Darby, thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is item 3, the superintendent's report. And I think we have a handout at our places with the reports and slides.
Very much.
I'm sorry?
Ms. Darby, I don't have any additional names that weren't called. If they perhaps signed up after the cutoff, then they didn't make it.
Okay, so just for a raise of hands, how many people signed up to speak after the cutoff and are here to speak? I signed up before the cutoff. Okay. So it looks like we have two. Was the board okay in allowing those two? Yep, is that with you? Okay, go ahead then, Courtney.
Can you raise your hand again? I think
It was Carol.
you can go ahead. Carol.
Thank you very much and good evening. I'm here this afternoon as part of a coalition of CCSD retired educators. When we learned about the proposals for ESSER, we really took a long look at these proposals. And we have many concerns, and you have a copy of the questions that, that we've raised. We are supporters of the district's theme, excellence in education, and we are greatly concerned about the recent proposals and the actions of the board and administration regarding efforts to close the achievement gap. We support the American ideal of public schools governed by the democratic process with the goal of ensuring that all children realize their full potential. We are concerned that the process currently implemented by the board to make decisions about the use of ESSER 3 funds violates that ideal and lays the groundwork for future privatization of our public schools. We believe that all eligible schools with their school improvement councils need to submit proposals for the ESSER 3 funds. Their unmet needs are still there, and they are great. You have heard all of the questions that are being asked about these proposals, yet so many more questions remain unanswered. We respectfully request that you consider our questions before you make any decisions regarding the distribution of these funds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Dillagard, and I too am representing the Coalition of Retired CCSD Educators. And I won't belabor the point since you have the full text of our letter, which was emailed to you and also handed out today. And I just want to add to what Carol has said. We encourage a pathway that starts with schools and their principals, their teachers, their school improvement council. We are not against participation and engagement with the community. What we do want to encourage strongly is that you advise and take advice from people who have information, who have a track record, who have been able to start schools in this district that you so proudly hail, like some of our magnet schools and some of our other schools over the years, and they are sustained. They are continuing to work. So we aren't the people who don't know what to do. We want you to continue to do the great work of caring for the students by developing a pathway that starts with specifics, sustainable information, ideas from people who know how to make it work, to support the principals, your great central staff officers and members who go out there and work with those schools and help them to come up with an implementable, sustainable program with measures and accountability. When somebody tells you, oh, I'm not going to give you the ideas, I'm just going to help collect them, but you're going to manage the money, there is a problem there. So we are concerned, but we encourage you to continue doing the great work by starting with the people who have to implement the work and make the change. Thank you and have a great Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is the superintendent's report. Mr. Kennedy?
Thank you very much, Ms. Darby. Next slide, please, Megan. So the superintendent's report today is in 3 parts. We'll have district highlights that will be shared by both Dr. Taylor and Mr. Brigman. And then Ms. Barori will give us an update, you all an update on the COVID. And then I will talk a little bit about the district for some facts and data that that I'm presenting. And then later in the ESSER 2 update, both Ms. Belcher and I would talk about the mental health services that we do have in the district and what's planned further. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Good afternoon. We wanted to start today's report talking about some district highlights, highlighting our students and our teachers and the hard work and great hard work that they're doing in the district. And so the first would be just highlighting the Family and Community Engagement Expo. It was held on February 4th at the Cooper River Center for Advanced Studies. It was an opportunity for parents and the community members to speak with different district departments, community vendors, and to learn about resources available to improve students' experiences in school. The speaker for that evening was Akko Kaban, who has worked with the district in past years, and we were happy to have him work with us during this event. Secondly, last week, Burke High School hosted their 17th annual band scholarship fair. Just talking with Mr. McLeod on Friday, he shared that over $1.6 million to date have been awarded from this fair alone have been awarded to students at Burke. And I believe that there are 2 universities who've yet to report. It was a great event. Not only was it for students in the Tri-County area, but students were able to come from neighboring school districts and participate. Prathana Samuel, she's a C.E. Williams Middle School student. She won her 3rd straight district spelling bee. She moves to the Low Country Regional Tournament. She, along with the rest of the top 10 spellers in the district, will have a chance to compete for a spot in the Scripps National Spelling Bee in the next few weeks. And finally, we'd like to salute more than 50 student athletes from the class of 2020 who signed national letters of intent to play a sport at the collegiate level. We honored them via a press release, a video, and of course did some special awarding of medals to them, which if they have not received, they'd receive from the district in the next coming days. That concludes the district highlights, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
So I wanted to take a moment and share a little bit about our substitute teacher fill rates. As you all are probably aware, when we came back from winter break, we with the rise in COVID numbers, we certainly were struggling to fill all of our substitute teacher requests on a daily basis. So this graph shows you on the week of January the 4th, we had about a 63% fill rate. It had been a little higher than that before break, but as we realized looking at this was the thought of actually increasing substitute teacher pay, which included a bonus structure. So we rolled that out on January the 10th. You'll see on the week of the 19th, we saw an increase of about 83%. And then last week, the week of January 31, we were at 93%, back to really the percentages before the rate before COVID 2 years or so ago. So we're very excited about this. It's made a couple of news channels of Berkeley County, I think, is following in our footsteps as well. So just wanted to share this, that we're feeling really good about substitute teachers and them taking jobs, which is really important.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board. I've got several COVID slides here to share with you. The first of which is first 2 of which you always see. This shows the trends in the state as of last Thursday, the 9th of February. All of the counties in and around us, in fact, the entire state is rated medium, with 2 of the indicators, incident rate and percent positive, still being high. It's scored as medium because the trend is the lowest possible, meaning it's decreasing. So in the end, the average is medium, even though we have two data points that are still high, incident rate percent positive. This shows our weekly total since the start of the school year. Students in blue, staff in orange. You can see the dramatic drop off over the course of the past month. The number of positive cases on the diagram shows it being about 258. We picked up a few straggler cases over the weekend, but it's still very much down to the rates that we had in the middle of September or so. So yesterday, DHEC published revised guidance. So we're still unpacking that guidance. We'll share that document if you haven't already got it off the website. We'll share that with you in the board update this week. We've had discussions with DHEC through the morning. We haven't finalized everything. And in fact, this slide was drafted before we finished our last conversation with DHEC. So I'll try to give you the key wave tops in that new guidance for K-12 schools. The first of which is related to the test to stay guidance. It was a very generic guidance that was in the last update. As you all know, we chose to implement that and has worked very effectively for almost the last month. They provided additional information along with the test to stay program. And we're still working through two key points of that. One is related to a household case and the quarantine guidance. If the individual in the household can't be quarantined, we have many households out there in which we have tight quarters, we have young children, we've got multiple siblings, and trying to isolate those children and maintain them in a situation where the test to stay works is up in the air. So that item is still being looked at closely for children that can't isolate. It looks like we're hopeful that we can bring them back outside of the test to stay program and have them tested at day 5, similar to the way we have the test to stay program in place, but we're working on that right now. The second item that was clarified was athletics, and DHEC's guidance is that athletics does not qualify for the test to stay program. And so although a child might be allowed back in school that's a close contact, they cannot participate in athletics, singing, wind instruments, and band for a designated period of time. They can be there, but they can't participate until after day 5. And so we're going to write all that down and get it put together so that we've got very clear guidance for our families. Probably the most important item that came out of that guidance is related to masks. And the guidance in the previous document from DHEC said that they strongly recommended masks be worn when the rates of the rates were high. The current guidance says DHEC recognizes that mask wearing in schools is most beneficial in the following conditions: the county is substantial or high. So the language has changed. And as you know, I just mentioned the last slide, technically we're down to medium from that high range. So there is a change in the verbiage for masks, and that's not on the slide, but in the guidance. And certainly we'll be taking a closer look at that. There's also new guidance for childcare centers, and this affects our pre-K children in our schools. And the most important guidance is that they established a test to stay program for those young children, and in which case the testing is required twice, once at day 3 and once between days 5 and 7, which is on your slide. So we hope to implement that guidance that now would affect the test to stay would affect all of our kids from the youngest up through 12th grade. The last point I wanted to make is that home testing is a possibility through the new DHEC guidance, and it was actually in the last DHEC guidance. But for equity issues, we did not want to implement that home test guidance until we had test kits that we could give out to our most needy families so that they weren't penalized for not having that in place. We're expecting to start getting test kits later this week. We'll work to distribute those to our schools and hope to be able to implement home testing so that folks wouldn't have to get to one of our test sites if they can't get to our test site as part of that test to stay program. I think that covers it, Mr. Kennedy.
The board chair and I received correspondence on a letter from the city of North Charleston. That letter was encouraging the district to continue our strong partnership with the district has with the city of North Charleston. The board chair and I will follow up with conversations with the city of North Charleston I want to present a few facts and data this afternoon, specifically around the investments that we have made and continue to make in District 4, which is the city of North Charleston, and also to confirm, my commitment to continue to work collaboratively with the city. And so on this first slide here, it shows the level of investments that have been made across all constituent districts for school construction and capital maintenance. Of course, school construction is cost that the investments that we make to build new schools and to renovate existing schools. The capital maintenance is to maintain those buildings, and those capital type items are such as roofs, HVAC systems, etc. And so what this shows then for the inception of the school capital construction program going back to the year 2000, the actual amounts that we have spent in both school construction as well as capital maintenance from that period to date, plus what's projected to be spent in the current school building program that we just entered into going through 2028. And so we have it listed by constituent districts, D1, D2, D3, etc. If you go to the last column, it says totals. You come down to right above the heavy gray line. It shows a $2.6 billion investment during this time period from beginning at the year 2000. So total across the district, $2.6 billion. And then if you take a look at the column that says D4, which is constituent district 4, North Charleston, and you come down also to that heavy gray line, you can see that during that same time period, the $2.6 billion that was invested, the dollars that were invested across the district, $930 million of that amount was for D4 exclusively, roughly 36% of the total of the $2.6 billion. The next highest constituent district percentage-wise is D2, which is Mount Pleasant at 23.42%. And you can see the other distributions there in that in the columns. Next slide, please. The next item that I'm showing is the per pupil, the average per pupil by school level. So elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. So the per pupil amount, excluding capital, excluding debt service and food service, that means general operating fund, all our title grants, Title 1, Title 2, etc. So this is an average of those funds on a per pupil basis. And this is for the current fiscal year 22. So the blue bar shows the per pupil averages for D4 schools. So you can see for the elementary schools, $13,491 on average per pupil. And then the yellow bars show the district-wide average excluding the D4. So again, looking at elementary schools, $13,491 for District 4, and then $11,412 for all other elementary schools in the county. And the pattern is the same for middle schools and high schools, as you can see. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the same information, the per pupil amount for D4. It highlights, however, in the light blue, the amounts of the per pupil that are exclusive to the ESSER 2 funds, ESSER 2 funds only, not ESSER 3, ESSER 2 funds only. Next slide, please. And then the next two slides, it shows the per pupil amount by each school in District 4. Again, by elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. So each school that's listed, that's part of North Charleston, that shows the per pupil amount. And then on the right-hand side, it shows the current investments from ESSER 2, only for the current fiscal year 22 budget. Next slide. And so the last slide here, the same thing as the previous slide. Instead of elementary school, this slide shows the totals for middle schools and high schools. So with that, that includes that section of the superintendent's update. some facts and data about the investments that we are making and have been making in North Charleston. We're continuing to make, and again, as I indicated at the beginning, we'll continue to have a strong partnership with the city for all the children in North Charleston. So with that, board feedback and questions, please.
Okay, so we want to do questions on this section, Mr. Kennedy?
If there are any, yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, do we have any questions? Dr. French?
So, one quick question is with the substitute teacher fill rate. How is that funded? Is there discretionary funding in the general operating fund for that?
So substitute teachers, of course, are in general operating fund. Every year we budget for the use of subs. For these additional dollars, and I will look to Shauna and Mr. Kennedy, I believe we are using ESSER dollars, ESSER 2, I believe, for this increase. And this increase is for the remainder of this year at this time.
And that doesn't require a vote from the board, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is captured in the ESSER 2 plan that's submitted.
Okay, and thank you for the COVID-19 update and the quick rundown of the new DHEC guidance. In the capital construction maintenance funds, I was curious, do the expenses in D4 include any of the CCSD staffing buildings located in North Charleston?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Doesn't CCSD have at least one staffing building in North Charleston?
A district building?
Yes.
We do have one that's.
Is that included in this expense?
We have not completed any capital maintenance projects on the District 4 building across from North Charleston High School that I'm aware of. I can double check, but I don't think we had any projects for that building. That fall
But
under-
we've had staff housed in D4 over the last 20 years.
Yes, ma'am.
correct? And so we have had construction expenses or facilities expenses related to that. Is that included in this?
Well, I think I'm hearing Mr. Barry say that well, certainly the facilities maintenance, just maintenance, but the dollars that we're showing here are capital maintenance. And so what I'm hearing Mr. Barry say, at least in this tenure, we haven't had any capital
So
investments.
this only includes schools?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Finally, I just want to say, as of 11:30 a.m. this morning, I did not see this packet loaded on board docs, and I really don't see anything except for the updated guidance from DHEC that couldn't have been provided to us last week. It's just really, it's impossible for us to do our job to get ready for the meeting if we don't have the packet ahead of time. Thank you.
Okay, next, Ms. Coates.
So thank you for this report. I do have a couple of questions about District 4 in North Charleston. I wouldn't if I wasn't. It didn't matter. So first on page 8, and I'm sorry to do this, but it is not our fault that we didn't have this in time to ask you these questions. So I do expect someone to find this answer before the end of today's meeting. In the capital building program, there was a large portion of North Charleston schools that were some of the oldest schools in the district. So it would make sense that they would be some of the schools that would get some of the new buildings first. I'd like to know the ages of those schools in relation to the other district. Were they the same within 10 or 15 years? Because Mary Ford, which is one of our most recent schools, was a 1954 build. So that doesn't say you're spending a lot of money in North Charleston if they were the ones most desperately in need of being built due to their age. But I can let y'all research that. The second question I have for page 8 is you've got a $300 million listing there that is not an expense. It literally says years 23 to 28. So I would assume that we're gonna not, is the 930 million trying to say that that's because 279 million that has not been spent for a year that has not come yet is included?
I think, yes, ma'am. I think I indicated that what we have are actuals from the inception of the program up to date, and then the projections going out in the current.
So those are not expense. Those have not been spent.
That's right.
So the actual is a third less of actual money that's been spent in D4.
If
If
we
you
would,
back out projections.
well, you would back out the $279.9 million. And I think when I did that last week, I believe the percentage was maybe 33% of the total. Somewhere along there, it's over 30%.
And so when it comes to, so now I've only got two more, Madam Chair.
But I was about to ask.
Okay. One, I do appreciate that we constantly go to this per student dollar. And it is true that that there are resources inside our North Charleston schools for wraparound and supporting children that should be applauded, and you should be able to get the correct acknowledgement. But what makes it difficult to make these numbers be realistic is that you're not accounting for things that are very clearly obvious. Just December alone, the light bill at Wando accounted for $15 per student out of GOF for student costs. If you take the dollars spent at Wando in December and divide them by the students, just like you're doing here, $15 of that paid for the electricity. At Deer Park Middle School, it costs $99.25 per student. So these numbers need to get realistic on what's affecting the student. There's $53,000 of expenses at Deer Park Middle School on our reporting transparency reports alone out of GOF in December of 2021 for lights, water, busing, things that have nothing to do with the number of students, but they artificially inflate that cost per student when you're trying to explain that these kids are getting a quality education. So I would ask that we have some conversations that acknowledge these base costs, these based costs that cannot be affected by the number of kids in the building. They shouldn't then be touted as dollars per student spent. And the last thing I would say is that we appreciate the acceleration program, but that program is a result of lack of achievement. It's not that we went to choose investments in North Charleston. We knew we had to do something because we weren't getting the results in North Charleston. It's great money, but it is, of course, the result of lack of getting results. Thank you.
Dr. Frazier, do you have a question?
Yes, I just have one question for Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Brinkman, would you please share with the board and our audience the relationship that we have with an outside agency as it relates to substitute teachers?
Certainly, I can. Kelly Educational Services is our partner or vendor that provides substitute teachers, training, and placement in our schools.
And I guess my question is, why is it that we're using an outside agency and at what cost? Could you go a little bit more into the specifics of using Kelly?
Sure. We originally engaged Kelly when we were looking or considering how we would offer insurance during the Affordable Care Act for our employees who were substitute teachers. That's when it first started. We had one person in human resources that managed substitute teachers, and it really needed to be more adequately staffed. So at that point in time, we decided to outsource to Kelly Services.
And would you say that this is the most cost-effective way of handling our substitute teachers? And are we using the same pay scale? Or because I've been told that Kelly pays more than the district, and that's not clear.
No, ma'am. The district and the district partners, I believe Berkeley County also uses Kelly, or I know that they do. The district set the pay scale that they're willing to pay for substitute teachers. To my knowledge, Kelly does not, or they have not with us.
And have we looked at the cost effectiveness of utilizing an outside agency to handle our substitute teacher program?
I have not looked at it in some time. We certainly look at workers' comp, all the other pieces that would go along with it. Certainly can talk to Mr. Kennedy about that if that's something the board would like to do.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Okay, she did. Okay. All right, anybody, Lauren or Joyce, any questions?
No
Okay.
question.
Yep, no questions? Okay. Okay, thanks for that report, Dr. French.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Coates for being so top of those questions when we really literally only just got this information. I mean, for myself, I'll have to look through this a lot before I can ask that level of detailed question.
Yeah, I think y'all got that point across. We're good. So, Mr. Kennedy, can you work with staff to work on potentially having the superintendent's report or as much of it as you can in board docs, you know, the Thursday or Friday before we have our meetings?
I would
Thank you.
venture to say, why wouldn't they be held to the same policy that we are by Wednesday?
Yeah, I think whatever, you know, there's been some, yes, go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
So, yes, I will commit to getting that done no later than the end of the work week. So, and just in the terms of the staff, so I understand that the board needs this information, but leading up towards the Friday, staff is still working on the 12 pages of Q&A from the January 24th board meeting. So it's a matter of, you know, just volume and time, but I will commit to get to you all by Friday before the board meeting, the board update for, with the exception of the COVID information.
Right, because the COVID information
Has to
you'll
be up
get
to
on
date.
Monday. Okay, all right.
So even though the agenda is published on Wednesday, you're going to commit to get us the packet by Friday? Why can't we used to get the packets when the agenda was published.
Well, we would get we didn't get it when the agenda was published. We would get, it would be uploaded on Thursday or Friday.
Right,
And
before the
sometimes there
weekend.
would be information that was not, you know, that wasn't included. I think
That's been recent, but about a year ago, we were much more likely to get it when when the agenda was
all
published.
right, Mr. Kennedy's made a commitment to work on that and hopefully we won't have 27 questions per, yep, this one.
I think we also have to recognize that this district is running an entire system, and they're not adequately staffed. And I think we should have some grace about that. They don't exist only to answer our questions. They will answer our questions. And I think that we just need to give them some grace.
Thank you. Okay, next is the item that, thank you. That item that Reverend Mack wanted us to add about policy ADD. Reverend Mack?
So that item ADD in reference to the face mask mandate. So let me also include, I believe it's policy BDE. That also indicates that unless we suspend the policy, but however, before the attorney jumps in, because you know, attorneys are always hasty to jump in, so let me.
That's why we pay them, honey.
Let me just, let me
There's a lot of
make a
money
statement and
fees to
then legal can jump in. But however, policy BDE, I believe it is.
Yep.
Does say that in discussion that we could not take action on an item, that's according to policy, in the committee of the whole, but we can refer it to the full board meeting, which is it's not set until the 28th. But the reason for, so having said that, and I'll be open and honest, the purpose for putting that on is to actually have a vote tonight to end the mask mandate. But however, policy currently does not allow us to do that, nor does it allow us to suspend, correct, in the committee of the whole. But however, we can discuss the item tonight to talk about ending the mask mandate. But however, that was the purpose of adding that item to the agenda to look at bringing the mask mandate to an end. But however, highly recommending students and staff to those that want to continue to wear the mask in school as we continue to move forward. But I would like to ask the board to consider adding that to the February 28th board meeting as an item for discussion in ending the mask mandate.
So parliamentarian, are you saying that you cannot add an item for action to the committee of the whole agenda?
No,
Yes or no?
no. What I am saying is the function of your committee is to refer to the full.
I know that, but can you add an action item to the committee of the whole agenda? So we could vote to put it on the
Right.
28th agenda.
Yes.
You're not denying us, you're
No,
not
ma'am.
saying we don't have that ability to do that,
No, ma'am.
should we choose?
Right.
So Reverend Mack, are you requesting that we put the mask mandate action item on the February 28th agenda? Is that what you're wanting to do?
Correct.
So why
Correct.
don't you?
According, based upon policy, we can't do it today, but we can definitely refer it to the full board meeting on the 28th.
Can you go ahead and make a motion to that effect so we can discuss that about putting it on the agenda for the 28th?
Sure, sure. I move that we add item A, policy ADD to the February 28th board meeting and discussion of ending the mask mandate.
Okay, Julie, did you get that?
Oh, is there a second?
I would second that. 'Cause
Okay.
All right,
We're
so
just
Reverend,
offering the opportunity for it to be on the agenda.
Correct.
all right, so Reverend Mack has made the motion and Ms. Coates has seconded it to add policy ADD to the February 28th board agenda to remove the mask mandate, is basically what you're wanting to do.
Correct.
Okay, Ms. Waters?
My question, I think, is for Mr. Barone. Because I know when I made the original motion, we amended it to include that we could change it if it indicated that, we were trending into the low category. And so I have two questions. One, you indicated that we're trending into medium. Is there any indication that we might trend low by early March when this would actually take into effect?
So we are in medium right now, according to DHEC, although two of the indicators are still high. If you look at those two indicators, we'd really need at least one of those to go into low so that you have a trend rate that remains decreasing. So that's technically low. To get to low, you really have to have one more get down into the low category, assuming the other one stays in medium. So let's say it's the incident rate. The incident rate to get to low has got to be 200 or less. High is greater than 200. You're right. That's medium. 200 is medium. 50 is low. Good catch. So we'd have to get down to 50 from 200, which is the medium range, and which we're still not close to yet. Now, the 2-week incident rate, we're obviously looking at 2 weeks ago where the numbers were extremely high. So I think it'll continue to drop off quick, but that's why we're at where we're at right now. I think just based on looking at the data that at the beginning of March, we will not be in the overall low category. I don't think we'll get that far by the time the meeting rolls around on the 28th.
All right, any other questions, Dr. French?
Yeah, so you mentioned that DHEC has changed their language and they're referring to mask for most beneficial in the county is in substantial or high categories. And that's a CDC metric that we talked about incorporating into our policy, but we didn't. Substantial overlaps with our medium. So I believe substantial is greater than 100 per 100,000 for incidence rate, for instance. And I'm not sure if they're talking about the incidence rate only in DHEC. So I hope that this week you can clarify more about that to better inform us as we move forward. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, ma'am. So we as a board and we as a district have really focused in on the DHEC measurements to make it consistent, to make it to allow us to make a conscious, very informed decision. That the DHEC measurement has always seemed to overlap in some areas and be a little different. At one point, they were counting a 7-day incident rate, not a 14-day incident rate. So we'll take a look and talk to DHEC about specifically what they're guiding off of.
That would probably help because substantial is a specific category for the CDC metric. So I assume that's what they're referring to, but we might want to make sure we know what they're referring to there and ask them to clarify.
All right, Ms. Coates?
So is there any entity that mandates that we wear masks? Because I'm hearing recommendation. I just want to get clear on that one piece. We're not mandated. We're making this choice, correct? Jeff, you talked to DHEC. You said you were on the phone with them this morning. Neither DHEC nor CDC is saying anything above the word recommended, correct?
Correct. And they always caveat their guidance with us to say you can always be more restrictive. they don't mind if we're more restrictive than what they're
Why
asking.
would they
for.
mind if we were less? I mean, the point is they make recommendations, not mandates. They don't have the authority to mandate to us, correct?
Correct.
When we go to this release of these home tests and these numbers start to drop dramatically, are you going to have faith in that? I mean, just what if we start handing out home tests and we start getting inside Charleston County School District a whole lot of negatives? Will you take that into account, or will you say that we're still going to go by the county-wide ranges? We're fixing to put into, we're getting more and more specific into knowing whether our school district is being affected by this with numbers. Are we going to use those numbers to make decisions in the near future?
Mrs. Coates, I certainly understand where that could be a factor because those home tests aren't part of the data that's reported by the county.
But they will be data used to determine whether
Whether or
children
not
can be
child
in
can stay in
school or not. So can we
That's-
begin using that data to determine if we're going to follow the policies for the schools or not?
I would recommend we stick with the DHEC data to guide, knowing that is a gap. But to calculate that and then do you use both, or do you just use that home data? It's to me, we're creating a substantial math equation when
I would use that term.
I didn't
way
do very well in
loosely.
calculus in college.
I would use, but the second thing is, and the most important thing for what we're discussing today is Ms. Waters was very accurate in her motion that she asked and we approved. There'll be a meeting on March 14th to discuss this. We're not waiting until March 28th. I would simply ask the board we did this in August, over and over, in September, over and over. As you said, there's never a danger of over exceeding expectations. We're simply saying, put it on the agenda the 28th. It's going to be on the agenda the 14th. None of these times means something's automatically going to happen. You're simply making sure it's in the public arena from this stage at every opportunity. And I would ask the board to approve that.
All right, any other questions on this particular item, Dr. French?
So I just wanted to see, it sounded like that Ms. Coates was asking about adding a different data metric to consider for whether or not we have policy ADD in place or not. And I guess it seems to me that that's not a staff decision, but a board decision to decide if we want to change
I was
the
asking his
policy
opinion of that
or
because,
waive it.
right.
Okay, you're just asking for opinion.
All right, any other questions on this particular item? Mr. Rowland?
I just want to add one thing as it relates to the discussion of the mask guidance. DHEC is very direct as it relates to wearing the mask in the test to stay program. So if the board ultimately votes to remove the mask mandate, I would ask that it consider to maintain the DHEC guidance for the test to stay program, the masking for that program.
And was outside the board's purview. Y'all instituted that without any action from our board. So I guess you could decide to keep it at your own leisure.
All right, any more questions, Dr. French?
Something came up about DHEC having authority to mandate things to us, and they do. Not necessarily
Yes,
has that been granted to them on the math situation, but DHEC
Yes, ma'am.
does actually have regulatory power over the school districts. I just wanted to make that clear.
I was specifically going off of the mask. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
They do.
Okay, any other questions? Then let's vote. The motion is Reverend Max asking us to move to add the policy ADD to our February 28th board meeting to remove the mask mandate. Ms. Green, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that motion passes. All right, next item is item 4, Strategic Education Committee. Ms. Harderick?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Darby. So we have 3 items on the strategic education agenda today. First item up is item 4A, and that is the review and the recommendation of the Heritage Keepers curriculum. Ms. Cutt? Or is this going to you, Ms. Belcher?
Nope, she's going up to the podium, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that everybody read the review that came out, but the results of the last Health Advisory Committee, the board voted unanimously to continue to allow Heritage Keepers to be in our schools with a couple of stipulations, and that is that one, if the if a school chooses to use Heritage Keepers in their school program, that they send their health teacher that is current at that school to the training first, to the Heritage Keepers training. It would not be through us. And then they, in return, would teach in collaboration with the Heritage Keepers instructors, so that there is more teamwork in that classroom and they're more vigilant of what the curriculum actually entails versus sitting kind of in the back and just allowing the other instructors from their entity to come in. The other stipulation in which schools should be doing this anyhow is if they use Heritage Keepers, that either before the program is used or after, that classroom teacher also needs to make sure that all the unaddressed standards and student outcomes that are required by the state are covered. I would suggest doing that before they come in, but really it could be up to the classroom teacher to decide what would be best based on their schedule. And lastly, the other recommendations just include those options for families. These are the options that were already current, but if a school chooses to use the Heritage Keepers curriculum, that family should be given the option to opt out of that curriculum if they choose to do so. They also need to have the option to opt into just strictly our state required curriculum. And so if the school uses Heritage Keepers, that would require the school to also offer possibly asynchronously through Canvas, where the kid can take what standards are being addressed within Heritage Keepers on their own. And then when they are finished and the teacher covers those unaddressed standards, then they can rejoin the classroom. The other option is what families always have too, and they can opt out completely out of the entire sexual education unit for middle school or high school. And that was everything that was on the review list.
Okay, so does anybody, before we get a motion, does anybody have any questions for Ms. Cutt? Dr. French?
So I guess, and maybe, I'm not sure if this is for you or not, but the question I have is that if there's a cost to the state through state and federal funds to use the Heritage Keepers program, and there's not for the 3 Rs, then why would we allow a school?
So
to
the
incur
funds
those
used for
costs?
Heritage Keepers are not from us. They have they're
I
funded.
said state and federal funds.
Right.
So it says, you answered one of my questions about cost comparisons, and it says Heritage Keepers is funded by state and federal funds, which were originally meant for Title I schools. And then later it says 3 Rs is free and does not require state or federal funds for implementation. So my question is, why would we opt to use this as a default program in a school if it ends up costing money that might otherwise be used for other parts of our education?
So that money doesn't come out of CCSD budget at all. So technically Heritage Keepers would be free for our schools.
Even though the state funding, how does the state funding impact the
Tammy might want to
allocations
help
we
answer
get?
this. She's here from Heritage Keepers, but she can explain to where their funding comes from, but it does not affect our school district at all or any funds that are
It's not
used.
set
for-
aside from the district's Title I
Right.
monies. It's, they've earned their own and are approved for that funding source.
Through the state,
Okay.
Heritage Keepers throughout the
Directly
state
to
has
them.
worked with the state to get that funding.
Correct.
It's not coming from,
Correct.
coming out of any
Correct.
of our budget.
So they're funded the same way regardless of whether a school opts to use them.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, did anybody else have a question? Ms. Coates, did you have a question? No? Anybody else have a question on this item?
No.
Okay,
Actually, I do have one more question.
okay,
It was clear in the recommendation that was provided by the committee that there were a lot of things that did not meet state standard or were problematic with this curriculum. And so I'm really confused about why the committee is recommending that we continue to use it.
Well, they're allowing families to have the option.
the option, for an abstinence only program, which is what Heritage Keepers is. But because it does leave out many of our student outcomes that the state requires, it's part of the comprehensive, which is why we've made these stipulations to make sure that everything is being taught. But I've been in the school district for over 20 years, and Heritage Keepers has always been on the approved option list for our schools. And it just allows that extra option if a school chooses to use that curriculum. However, but that being said, and I think this is maybe where you're going, is it's confusing for schools to have more than the one option. And it does take a lot of extra work for the school if they choose that, because they've got to go around and make sure everything else is being covered as well, versus the classroom teacher just teaching the curriculum themselves, just like we would in any other subject area. And there are no other abstinence only programs available to us? Not that we're using, not to my knowledge. And the state curriculum recommends that we stress abstinence only, but we also go beyond that in teaching contraception at the high school level, and prenatal care and postnatal care and adoption, which are often those are some of the unaddressed standards that are left out of Heritage Keepers.
All right, Ms. Waters, do you have a question?
Just a quick question. How many schools typically opt into using Heritage Keepers?
Not many, and I did put that on the list for you guys to see. I believe there might have been 8 to 10 schools that were on that list. The majority of the schools are in the North Charleston or West Ashley area, and we have one Mount Pleasant school that is currently using the curriculum.
All right, Ms. Herderick, do you want to make that motion?
Sure. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommendations set forth by the Health Advisory Committee for Heritage Keepers curriculum to remain on the district's approved curriculum list of resources.
Okay. And Ms. Coates seconded, so we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? If not, we will vote. And Ms. Green, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes.
May I ask one question? Sorry.
Yes.
What's the next curriculum on the HAC's agenda to review? And when does that start?
So in the bylaws, it's every 5 years that a curriculum has been approved. When 5 years is up, they come back. So our outside of Heritage Keepers, Advocates for Youth, only specific lessons were approved back in 2020. So it'll be 2025 before that comes back to the table.
In 3 Rs?
Yes, ma'am. The rights, respect, and responsibility by Advocates for Youth.
That's the same one you were
Yeah.
referencing.
And again, it's supplemental, just like Heritage
But it
Keepers.
is up for review at the end of the 5 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Coates. We appreciate it. Ms. Herderick, next on your agenda.
Next up is item 4B, the academic calendar for 2022-2023. Ms. Woody.
Thank you, Ms. Herderick. Ms. Woody couldn't make the meeting today,
Okay.
so I'll be covering for her.
Thank
As we typically do, we're presenting 2 calendars for public comment for the next school year. As the board knows and has been described in the cover memo, there are quite a bit of constraints on flexibility around the school year calendar. Specifically, that it has to cover 9 months, that we can't start before the 3rd Monday in August unless we do a modified year-round calendar, that it must cover 180 days of instruction, that we must have at least 3 days of collegiate and professional development, free weather makeup days, election day. This coming year, that will be no students or teachers in attendance because it's an even numbered year. And then the holidays have to be mentioned. Now, as this board knows, the teachers are eager to have more work time and time to actually process because it has been a demanding couple of years and we don't have a lot of breaks within our calendar. So the differences between this calendar and previous years is that we added a few early release days each month so that we can have some work time for teachers. And we tried to time those around the end of the quarter. But the difference between the two calendars, the calendar option 1 and the calendar option 2, primarily is the location of spring break. That's the largest difference. Now, we are as a district stepping back on the possibility of the modified year-round calendar, which would have a very different schedule. But given that's a more substantial change, we wanted to take more time to pursue that. So that wouldn't be mentioned to this board until the following year. So that would be for the 23-24 school year at the earliest. Other than that, I would just say if there are any questions on the calendar, we would get public comment, come back with the public comments for the February meeting to vote to approve the calendar. One board member did ask if we could all get in the same room with Dorchester County and Berkeley to ensure that we're coordinating. As you may have noticed, the spring breaks are on different weeks. We are going to try to do that through Dr. Taylor's office.
Okay, any questions, Ms. Coach?
So we're in the e-learning cohort for how long, and how long have we been in it?
We've been in the e-learning cohort for 2 years.
So it would be 19, 20, and 2021. I mean, 2021 and 21, 22, correct?
That's right.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure, Ms. Roberts, do you know how long she would remain in it? Yeah, once we're in it, I think we're in it unless we make any mistakes along that cohort. I think one of the things that's shifted though, Mrs. Bond Coates, is that in the pandemic, there was more flexibility around the use of e-learning days. And we use them for a variety of different reasons, as you know, to give space for students to catch up, for teachers to catch up along the way. The state has been very clear that they will not allow that moving forward. They should be used for weather-related or other emergency events to provide instruction in lieu of missing a day of school.
So then I think that's what's creating some of the confusion is they are for weather-related days. So we don't have any weather-related makeup days in the calendar, right? We wouldn't need to have both. If we have e-learning, we don't need to have weather-related makeup days.
That's correct. We do, the e-learning days are our weather-related.
So there's no makeup weather days in these two calendar versions.
No, but there are tentative e-learning days in lieu of the weather-related days.
Perfect. So there's not both in the same.
That's correct, ma'am.
And so then the state of South Carolina is going to continue to allow this for all districts. There's no sunset on this?
On this being the
e-learning system
not that
for
I'm aware of, as
calendaring.
long as they're used for weather-related learning days and that we're continuing to learn from our experiences. But I think the concern has been in COVID that they may have been overused by other districts.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions on the calendar?
Just a clarification question. Will this go to the public for comment for the next 2 weeks and back to the board for approval on the 28th?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Would we be able to wait on public comment until after Dr. Taylor's had that meeting with the other districts to see if we can get all on the same page for spring break?
I don't want to answer the question about holding up on public comment, but I can share with you, for example, Berkeley County, they have a 2-year calendar, so they approved their calendar last year for this year and next year. Once we talk to the other districts, I was going to let Ms. Belcher know, but I know, for example, for Berkeley County, their board already choose their calendar, and I'm not sure if they're being on. So just wanted to give you that.
Okay. Right. So I think in the past, we're being more proactive about it this year, but I think in the past, we've still done public comment, letting people know when is Berkeley's and when is Dorchester's. Dr. Frazier?
Yes, I just have one comment and a question. And my question is, have we maximized the time that teachers are saying, we need more planning time, we need more time to decide what we're going to do next? And how do we go about maximizing the time that teachers will need so that they won't have to take work home, so that they could just come up for some fresh air? Did we get their input? Did we use the available time needed? Could you explain that to the board and to the audience here, please?
So again, I think one of the challenges with the school year calendar is that we're very much constrained by the guidelines of the state in terms of we can't start before the third week of August. Days have to be used for certain purposes. We know that the teachers do want more work time, which is why we did add additional early release days. So the idea would be that students would go home early, but that gives time for teachers to do additional work and professional development. From a systemic perspective, we do think that there's potential, though we still need to explore with teachers, with local communities, with parents, the idea of a modified year-round calendar, which would allow more frequent breaks over the course of the year, start earlier in August and later in June. But to get to that point, because it would be a more substantive change and affect the system and things like daycare and summer camps, we see that as requiring a longer time horizon to get engagement from the community. We may be coming back to this board with pilots and potentially at some of the acceleration schools, if it's something their local community, parents, teachers, and the administration believe would be helpful. But at this point, that process is just beginning.
So we will have teacher engagement. I'm hearing from teachers all over the district that we're experiencing burnout. We need more time to plan. We need more time to do whatever we need to do so that we can offer our best services to our students. So we're going to engage our teachers at a later date. Are you saying that? Or?
Well, we heard that too, ma'am. So that was part of the engagement around this calendar, which is part of the reason why we added the early release days. We can't add full days off or e-learning days because we're constrained by the regulations of the state.
So you've gotten teacher input, and the next 2-week input would be from parents.
Yes, yes.
Okay, Ms. Coates, and then we'll.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that folks, that we have a clear understanding of what bringing this back on the 28th means in terms of the public comment period, because the agenda is going to come out in 8 days. So how long are you going to have this up for public comment if the agenda with the recommendation is going to be printed in 8 days from today?
I mean, be on the agenda and they can be getting public.
I was
comment.
going to say, to be clear that it'll be an action item, but how long are you going to have it up on for comment?
Thank you. As we've done every year, we will keep the survey up until Monday before the meeting. What we typically do is on that Friday, and it's recommended that for we'll keep the survey up until that Friday. We'll give all of that data to the school for her to take a look at, review, look at comments, and then be able to make some decisions when she presents that on that Monday during the board meeting. But we will give the final count, if you will,
On Friday, the 25th.
On that Monday during the board meeting, and that's from, of course, community members, teachers, parents, staff, and students.
And that will close on Friday, the 25th.
It will close that Monday morning.
On the 28th itself, just because I know a lot of people want to put comments in, so folks need to know, wake up tomorrow and start doing your comments. So it's going to be open till the 28th.
Yes, and then of course, we will put that out via email.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Lauren, do you want to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move the calendar options forward for public input through a survey on the CCSD website and determine a date for the survey results to be reported to the board, which we just heard will be February 28th.
Second. All right, so we have a motion from Ms. Herderick and a second from Ms. Coates, and it'll be reported to the board on February 28th. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, on that, and thank you, Ms. Belcher. Can we please vote? And Ms. Green, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. Go ahead, Lauren, still on SEC.
Great. We just have one more item on the agenda, item 4C, and that's an ESSER update, and that will turn it over to Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ederick. So this is the ESSER update. It's in two parts. I'll give an overview on the update, and then Dr. Taylor will spend some time walking you all through the what we call the ESSER 3 phase 2 engagement process. Next slide. January 24th, we present a vision here of all students being able to read on grade level by the 5th grade by the spring of 2027. It was supported by 3 pillars that's shown to the left here. Pillar 1, rigorous grade level instruction. Pillar 2, high quality teachers and leaders. And pillar 3, wraparound services. And then supported or undergirded by the structure of accountability and support and engagement and voice. So this update is going to focus on that last item, engagement and voice. Next slide. At the 24th, January 24th board meeting, board members had a number of questions. We asked that those get sent to staff. We received those. We provided through board brief on Friday the answers to those questions. They'll be posted on the agenda item under this on board doc. So that should be there this afternoon. Next slide. So as you all know, we have 71 proposals from the outside. And what we're proposing here is that we put a pause on reviewing those proposals and reshift our focus on making sure that we hear the voice from our principals and our school communities. And we believe that the focus from this point forward should be significantly on increasing the number of students reading by 5th grade. And so the intent of bringing to the board this vision on January 24th is to help us align our ESSER $3 to the greatest extent possible around this vision. And therefore, again, all the proposals that we have received, we will be looking at those from that lens of making sure that the funding that we might provide, the implementation around those proposals will be aligned to that vision of all students reading on the grade level by 5th grade. The third bullet here, to get to that point, we propose that we redirect the ESSER process to the school level so that we get more stakeholder engagement before considering any of the 71 proposals. And in order to do that, we need to pause decisions on the community-based organizations proposed until we get that input. So to get there, we believe that if we're going to focus on students that need to be on grade level, which is all students, we need to be able to identify the number of students in each school who are reading below grade level. So we will do this analysis across the district on the 24th of January. Also indicate that this idea of creating a standard. And so in order to do that, we need to use data. And so part of that in this particular instance here is to ensure that we know as a system by school where our children are on reading. Some of the programs to address the reading shortfalls that we have in the district will be district-wide decisions, such as the core curriculum. So for instance, we have a pilot program in place now on a new curriculum, the EL curriculum, that is a district guided process, district funded process. So it's essentially managed process that is the implementation takes place in the schools. Teacher training is another example, as well as staff recruitment coming out of the talent pillar. Now, some programs would be school level decisions, such as wraparound services. That's pillar 3. And when we take a look at the 71 proposals, most of those current proposals actually would align to pillar 3 around the wraparound services. Funding to schools will again be based on the number of students reading below grade level. And the schools and district would be in agreement, would have to be in agreement for programs that would be provided by the district, provided by the schools, provided by community-based organizations. So again, schools and partnership between schools and the district. Next slide, please. So because we are putting a pause on the implementation of the ESSER $3, there are some critical items, in the proposal, in the ESSER 3 plan that we need to take action on. And top of that list is mental health services. So we're going to talk a little bit now about what we're doing on mental health and what we have planned for mental health. So in ESSER 2, we have, there's 1.2. Yeah, in the ESSER 2, we have already $1.2 million for mental health. In the ESSER 3 plan, there's $14.3 million for mental health. In a minute, I'll ask Ms. Belcher to talk a little bit about what's already in place with mental health services in our schools. So there's 1.2 million for ESSER 2 and 14.3 million for ESSER 3. Those are additional amounts above and beyond what we already have in place. Now, on this list here, again, these are what we consider critical items that are time sensitive, that if we are going to make an impact, we need to go ahead and spend these funds now. So let's begin spending the funds. So mental health services, broadband expansion in rural areas, and then the student teacher early hiring is part of our teacher recruitment process. So we have student teachers that are in our schools now, but they have not made a commitment to work with CCSD. And so to incentivize and entice them to stay on with CCSD once they graduate college is to have some incentives, early sign-in bonus, financial support for the practice examination, as well as for certification from the state. Now, what's being proposed here in order to be able to move forward with these expenditures, beginning to expend these dollars in these three areas: mental health service, educational technology, student teacher early hiring, is that on the March 1st Audit and Finance Committee, we will have a financial analysis of these three areas that we will present to the Audit and Finance Committee with a financial presentation to the school board at the March Board of Trustees meeting. Actually, that would be probably the committee of the whole in March. And then if we go through that process, then that allows the system then to begin to expend the funds in these critical areas. So Ms. Belcher, would you talk a little bit about what's currently in place for mental health service?
Right. Just want to make sure that we're assuring the public that we're certainly not waiting on applying additional supports for mental health. As we presented to the board in December, we were very concerned about mental health, about our students across the district. One of the investments from ESSER 2 is to free up dollars to allow us to contract with additional providers. To date, we've got 6 additional providers out serving schools and another 8 going through the necessary processing, fingerprinting, and others to be approved to get out to schools. That's in addition to the 33 Department of Mental Health counselors, the 11 community and school counselors, and the 15 social workers that are deployed across the district right now. And again, we've been trying to have an all hands on deck approach to mental health so that those administrator supports who have mental health experience can do more direct service to schools, and we can backfill the administrative aspects of their job in order to have as much service as possible for students. Under ESSER 3, we are proposing more substantial investments in long-term mental health, which would come before the board, including things like art therapy rooms and calming rooms. I'm sorry, an art therapy program and calming rooms to institutionalize some of the mental health investments that we think would be valuable, but that would be on a longer time horizon because it's a more substantial investment.
Next slide, please. So next, Dr. Taylor will present the ESSER 3 phase 2 engagement strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy charged me with putting together and leading a team of leaders here in the district to put together an engagement strategy as we work towards this end goal. And some of the members of the team include myself, Ms. Belcher, Dr. Williams, Ms. Simmons, Ms. Dangerfield, Mr. Muhammad. And then we had a list of 6 principals to include Mr. Hamer also was a part of that team. And then we had principals, Mr. White, Mr. Larson, Mr. Dallas, Ms. Malone, and Mr. Kevin Smith. And so we had a series of 5 meetings and came up with an engagement strategy, which I am going to share at this time. And so the deck that you have is actually, we're calling this their toolkit. So it has information that is that you've seen before. So I may not repeat some of the slides because Mr. Kennedy has just reviewed those with you all. But just so that you'll know that would be the roadmap, if you will, that our principals will use when they engage their communities. So the first slide, please, Maggie, talks about the vision and the pillars. And so I won't review that for you. And then the second slide, which talks about the overview of funding, Mr. Kennedy just went through that with you as well. But we thought including these slides are important when our principals engage their stakeholders so that stakeholders know what our vision is and what we are doing. Maggie, would you please go to the third slide? So the third slide is, we call it our phase 1 engagement. It was presented to you in August, and it talks about all the communication avenues that were used as we started working with ESSER 3 from the June meetings and surveys with over 4,000 respondents up through our January meeting, which was our retreat to get to where we are as it relates to the vision. And of course, as I said, our principals will go into in depth with this when they meet with their stakeholder groups. And so when we look at a timeline, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that, today well, from January 20th through today, we designed the strategy. From today through the 28th through the end of the month, we're going to communicate the strategy and deploy tools. And I'll talk a little bit about those to include FAQs, and we have some data collection tools that we'll present and provide to our principals as they move forward with this process. In March, our school level engagement will occur, and this is when our principals will engage with their stakeholder groups. April 25th, we'll report back to you all what our principals have shared with us. And then ultimately, throughout this entire process, our next 5-year strategic plan is due to the state. Every 5 years as a district, we have to work towards that goal, and that's due in June. And so all of this will ultimately align with our 5-year strategic plan. Next slide, Maggie. Again, as our principals engage with their stakeholders, we asked them to, we gave them some prompts, if you will. So asking about the strengths, what's going well in their schools, what are our good qualities, what the opportunities are, if there are weaknesses, what they are, and then definitely threats, what are the blockers that you're facing. And these are talking points that our principals will use as they engage their different stakeholder groups. And as we look at the process on the next slide, we have a timeline for that as well. So our principals will engage with their teachers in early March. They'll engage with school improvement councils again in early March. And then of course, those schools that do have functioning active PTAs and PTOs, they will bring that parent group into the fold as well. They will engage with their families in mid-March based off of what the feedback they receive from teachers and SICs. And they'll use a myriad of ways to do that, to include phone, email, video, and any other strategy that the communications team helps them with. And then of course, community partners, engaging with them will occur in mid-March. Next slide, Maggie. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the guardrails. This was most important to the principals who participated on this engagement strategy team. What we wanted to denote is what the parameters are. We kept getting questions, what are the proposed, what are the parameters? What are our guardrails? And so it was important for, if you look under district provided supports, it's important for our principals to make certain that they knew that we would support them with high quality core curriculum in math, ELA, science, and social studies, as well as it relates to hiring and retention, that that principal hiring and succession plans is important to the district. They wanted to know that employment with Charleston County School District was important to us as well as them. And then as it relates to school identified supports, the third bullet that says staffing at schools, which means that staff selection would be able to occur at the school level, as well as the very last bullet under school identified supports. It says that schools should be able to opt into more or less support from the district based on need and demonstrated results. Next slide, Maggie. The engagement toolkit, and basically this just says that we are going to provide scripts as needed, surveys as needed. Again, the frequently asked questions tool is available, as well as the collection tool, which is a Google Doc that our principals are able to use during this process. Next steps. And this just shows our phase 1, 2, and 3, our community input, school input, and then of course, then matching school needs with community opportunities. And our takeaways, again, just the vision, the needs assessment, the proposals, and then just making sure we align everything ultimately to our strategic plan. That concludes this brief of this engagement strategy. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taylor. So school board members, that concludes the ESSER 3, the ESSER update. So we'll open up to your feedback and questions.
All right, any questions on the ESSER update? I have a question. I think that you addressed this, but I know we heard some of the public speakers saying that there are no mental health supports in their constituent district, and I just want to make sure that's not accurate. I mean, we have mental health supports across the district, correct?
That's correct. There's still a processing to get to every school and the access, but that is correct.
Okay, other questions, Dr. Frazier?
And I'd just like to make a comment regarding the need for mental health and social workers. This district for years have had only 2 social workers for years within the district. And to hear that now we have 12 or 13 is a remarkable accomplishment. And I just want to say thank you. The other issue I'd like to share with our audience is that we just don't have people with the proper training just sitting out there waiting for us to hire them. That getting the people into the district who are already engaged in employment in all of the other agencies, that we have to look at our base from where we're getting these people. So it takes a minute to do that. And I just want to applaud the efforts that you all are doing, because I'm hearing from people coming in, oh, we don't have this, we don't have the mental health professionals. We just don't have many people out there with the proper training to serve our students, and it's going to take us some time to do so. Just want to say thank you. And some of the people who have the loudest voices about what is happening in our schools, where were you years ago? This just didn't happen, that we lack the proper mental health and social workers in this district. Thank you, staff, for your due diligence, and I just want to give you a pat on the back for work well done.
All right, Mr. Kennedy?
I also will add to that this is not a unique problem with Charleston County. It's a statewide problem. And the governor has recognized that. He's tasked the head of the Department of Health and Human Services to work with agencies, including the State Department of Education agencies, to be able to address this from a statewide perspective, the lack of mental health workers in the state, and the challenges that it offers it subjects our children to.
All right, Dr. French, and then Reverend Mack.
Just a follow up on that, can we have maybe a report that demonstrates how much, what kind of mental health supports we have especially in the middle and high schools? And how much effort, like a full-time person, half-time, whatever is being done, because there does seem to be a difference of perception about this, and I think it would be helpful. The other thing is I wanted to ask, on slide 5, when you're talking about basing funding to schools on the number of students reading below grade level, and I'm hoping that you're not just talking about elementary school, you're talking about middle and high school as well. Because we have a lot of kids not reading at grade level now, and I think that we need to fund those interventions. But is that your plan?
So the vision is all children reading on grade level by grade 5. So that's the elementary school. However, there are needs in the middle school, needs in the high school. And so we are in this, amongst us, in discussion about what those interventions look like outside of those 5 grades,
Okay.
or 6 grades.
And with the new curriculum, and is that called EL? Just so I have,
That's the curriculum we're currently piloting. Yes, ma'am.
right. Would ESSER be able to get us to implement that faster?
That's the
across the board?
advantage of ESSER. That's right. It's still because it's a complicated program, there's a 2-stage implementation. We do the units of study around fluency, comprehension, and kind of knowledge first, and then we do the transition to the phonics and phonemic awareness, or the skills piece for upper grades second, because we already have a phonics program in place. So we're trying to ease the transition on teachers. But we anticipate the whole district with a sufficient investment from ESSER dollars will be able to be up and running by the 23-24 school year.
Okay.
All right, Reverend Mack?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Belcher. My question is, and I know there's been an outcry, and we see it about mental health, and staff have been working with that extensively. So those schools or parents that may come in to say that we do not have any of those services in our schools, are there a pathway or guidance given to those particular schools or kids dealing with mental health issues on how they can seek help? Is there some type of resource outline that's given to schools or the principals so that we are not missing any student or child that may present with those types of defining issues? Is that in place?
So there is certainly a process, but I think Dr. Frazier's point about us still, even with the numbers that I read off, we are still understaffed. So I don't want to overpromise that we're meeting our entire need at this point, because we know we aren't. But the general process, if a parent is interested in making sure the child has mental health, if you should go to the counselor or social worker at the school. If there's not one person allocated into that role, talk to the assistant principal or principal, and they can make sure to connect you through alternative programs. Because we do have some social workers who are swinging over several campuses that are smaller in size, as a for instance. And I will provide the school by school report so we can get a broader sense of where our needs are.
Yeah. And I asked that question simply because, and if it's the pleasure of the board, and if we do not have this in place already, but some type of marketing tool per se, that parents can have at their fingertips, of resources that are hotline numbers that they can call, what the process is if your child presents an issue, and how that can be carried out as far as the parent having knowledge of how to next step and what to do to try to gain that access from the school base or outside if they're at home, a hotline number. If there's some type of marketing tool that can capture all of that on one sheet that parents can have at their fingertip, I think that would be helpful, because we do realize that it is a major issue within our schools, and particularly where they're lacking those resources or opportunities, parents will have something at their fingertips.
I appreciate that. And Ms. Coker couldn't be at the meeting today, but I'll make sure to follow up, because I think we do have some version of that, but to get to the comprehensive level that you're talking about, we'll make sure we follow up.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say, because Ms. Coker is texting me to make sure I say it to you all, is that it's important to realize that direct service and mental health is not just the therapy piece, that some of it starts with relationships between teachers and students, and some of the other investments that the district has made, for example, in restorative practice, are going a long way to have adults listen to kids, build relationships with kids, so that kids have one adult in the building that they know they can go to, and ensure that we're getting the support that they need, because it's a tough time for everyone. Some kids have very severe mental health needs, but all kids have needs right now. So the more that we can have the other supports in place, it's helpful.
Any other questions, Ms. Waters or Ms. Coates?
Yeah, we do both do.
Okay, Ms. Waters?
My question or concern is around sustainability and sort of always has been. I kind of said at the beginning of this ESSER process that I really felt strongly that the money should be spent on sort of a vision that encompasses programs that can replace what doesn't work now instead of more things or, you know, temporary expenditures. And I'm just sort of looking down the list here of sort of the district's provided supports. And I saw like teacher leader compensation and bonuses to recruit and retain teachers. And you all know, I know a lot about that in my line of work and very much care deeply about it. But the thought is that, you know, people are not signing up to be teachers right now. You know, folks are leaving the profession. People are not enrolling in higher ed programs. The alternate route programs are not seeing the numbers either. And so the thought is, while it would be great to sort of incentivize people entering now, what happens when those bonuses run out in 2024? You know, what do we do to move forward and continue to be able to plan? Because I see that as sort of a, you know, sort of surface solution where we really could be focusing on establishing, you know, better supports around teacher culture. You know, how do you make a teacher feel like they're appreciated and valued at work, even if it's in a non-monetary mean? You know, what are some best practices where teachers can, you know, learn in centers of excellence from other folks, and also looking at the freeing up of time and things like that. And so I'm just wondering, you know, we're going to get these proposals from schools, and certainly we should be listening to principals about what they want, but how are we going to also measure the request with what we will be able to do ongoing, aside from just giving this money one time and it be gone by 2024 and we're back in the same position?
Yes, I agree that we need to think about sustainability. And so the process that we're putting in place is allowing for the additional input that I think that's needed. But then there's will be a process in place so that we can prioritize. And part of that prioritization is looking at the sustainability of what we potentially put in place that we think would do the best for our children.
Yeah, I'm just really concerned we're going to miss an opportunity to bring in some really innovative system-wide changes for sort of individual needs. And so I'm thinking also it may be nice to say we're going to spend X amount of dollars on this type of request versus looking at systemic initiatives. And so I just really like to implore us all to think about that as we go through the process.
I think there's still some information that needs to be presented to board on initiatives that we've been working on to the point you're raising that predated even COVID. So things like a sustainable leadership pipeline, which doesn't necessarily have to be tied to compensation or bonuses. It can be tied to continuous learning, working with the collegial, being able to stretch your influence as a leader over more schools, or to help train novice principals. Like, how do we think about that? And Ms. Nichols, myself, and other leaders across the district have been having conversations about how do we think about our talent. And you know a lot about it. I also know a good deal about talent from our work at TNTP and the irreplaceables. Money is just one lever, but I don't think we're maximizing all of our levels on the talent. And a lot of our investments, at least in the curriculum instruction side, is in capacity building around professional development, making sure we're getting more folks ready for where the district needs them in areas like multilingual education, leadership for sure, special education, and math and science. So that is a big focus. I do think there's still work to be done. I'm putting this all together so that we can show it, because I think some of the efforts, if they do work, I think one of the good news about some of our recent conversations with community partners is there's interest in supporting our public schools. So I hope that if we have evidence of things that are working, we can also be creative about figuring out how to sustain them beyond public dollars.
Thank you.
Ms. Coates?
Yeah. So first off, thank you very much for putting a pause on the ESSER process. I think it got very frenzied, and I think that you've taken the right move, and I applaud you very much, because I know that was not an easy decision to make. The only caution I have is that 960 days from today, you're finished. That is September 30th, 2024. You are out of the $222 million we have left in ESSER 2 and 3, and they're obligated. I think Ms. Waters touched on that. But I don't think we can emphasize enough that that is 960 days from today. And so we're going to wake up in 961 days with either a transformed and sustainable system or not. And I appreciate the pause and I appreciate the depth of thoughts that's going into this, but I don't want to lose the fact that if you say we're going to have things going in place in the 22-23 school year, that 90 days after the end of that school year, that money doesn't exist anymore. So I can't emphasize that enough. And Ms. Taylor, am I correct that your timeline in the January presentation is been replaced with this one, that we're not doing February communications and engagement strategies? That's correct. Thank you.
All right, anybody, any other questions?
Kate, I have a question.
Yep, Ms. Green?
I kind of a follow-up to what Cindy was just talking about. I heard the pause, but I may have missed it. I didn't hear when we will respond to the 71 requests. What's the plan for saying to those organizations that we are taking a pause, or what is the plan for when those organizations will know that they will not be funded or will be funded?
Ms. Green, the timeline has the engagement taking place in February and March. So decision would be made sometime during that time period, probably towards the end of March. And the timeline shows that in April, we would present to the board the results. So I would say that decision will be made probably towards the end of March, 1st of April.
So that would include the proposals that we would now get from the schools and the principals, as well as those 71 proposals, right?
Well, it would include the input of principals in their communities.
Any more, Ms. Green?
I'll follow up with somebody because I think I'm not understanding, but I'll follow up.
Can I follow up with so it sounds, and I missed the very beginning, so I don't stop them, but taking a pause, doing the community engagement piece, we will take a look at the 71 proposals, and in the engagement piece, we're getting direct input from principals and community SICs, PTAs. And I don't know if you said this when I had stepped out, but I assume that there are going to be some programs like the whole reading on grade level by grade 5 that are going to be district-wide programs that we're going to use ESSER money for. So that may not be, or we may have some feeder pattern or parts of the district programs that aren't these community proposals, but these are proposals or programs or processes that staff is going to come up with that are going to address the needs and the pillars that we've talked about. Is that correct?
So to Ms. Waters' point about the sustainability of systemic change. And so it's looking at the individual needs of schools, giving us, the pause gives us an opportunity to do that. And at the same time, take a look at what we believe as a system is needed to put in place that when ESSER dollars expire, 960 days, that we won't wake up and say we missed an opportunity to actually transform the system. And so it's the timeline is critical. What we put in place is critical. So a lot has to come together. And so we're focused on that. We're making some internal changes to help manage that. And as Ms. Belcher said, we'll be reporting more and more of that to you all through these processes.
Kate, I thought one thing you said didn't match what I thought Dr. Taylor said. And that was, we're not going to have community engagement what I thought I saw was that you were sending the principals out to execute that and communicate that as a pipeline back to you in your school level engagement process. Am I correct? You're no longer doing community meetings as a district, putting out these meetings. You're having the principals meet with their teachers, their SICs, and their families, and then they report that to you, and then you report that to us. So we're going to hear, is that the pipeline you envision?
And we have, so we have a requirement rather for two sets of community engagement. So we have the one around the ESSER, which is new. We never had ESSER dollars before. And we have the 5-year requirement from the state each year for the strategic plan, which requires a level of community engagement. That is a requirement.
So the
And
strategic
we're trying
plans.
to integrate those two. So
Okay.
that we can do them at the same time and link the new 5-year STAT plan to the new vision of kids reading on grade level by grade 5, as opposed to having two separate strategies of two.
I just want to make sure we understand this, because if we expect that we're going to be asked to attend community meetings, I think that is not what Dr. Taylor said. We will have principals creating those meetings where, and we don't want to come back in 6 months and go, well, weren't we ever asked to go to these meetings? This engagement process for ESSER is a principal driven in their building and in their attendance zones. And then, of course, strategic plan, you'll do community wide.
Dr.
That
Jones.
doesn't sound right.
You see where it gets, yeah, you see where we're getting confused.
So if you look at, I'm not sure what page is on, but.
They're not
the
numbered.
page where it talks about the school level engagement.
Yes.
And so at that time, as it relates to ESSER,
Right.
there will be meetings where board members can attend. When you get down to the last,
So I'm asking who's doing those meetings, the district or the individual schools? I think that's where I'm confused.
So, and sometimes the answer will be both.
Gotcha.
Sometimes it'll be both, depending upon the nature of the meeting, because as the shared, ultimately, we'd like to have seamless alignment with the strategic plan process, so we don't have to call you out to 2 different meetings, but at least in 2 instances, if we start to plan aligning those strategies, there will be times where you may have to come out.
Then that's
And
fine.
you'll get that information separate from this one.
But are we expecting both of those aligned communication processes to culminate in your report to the board on April 25th? That's in here as the report to the board and the committee of the whole. Is that going to have all the culmination of what you just said is going to come to us with, this is what we heard in your report to us on April 25th?
It will not.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. French.
So I would anticipate that as we go through this process, the board will be kept updated. So it won't be like we tell you what the plan is, the process is now, and then 3 months later, you would be the first time you hear it, have an update.
Oops, all right, Dr. French and then Ms. Green.
So I guess I'm confused because when Dr. Taylor was going through this, I thought this was going to be part of the process that really says to the schools, this is your chance to tell us what you need, what you want, and how we should think about spending ESSER money without going to community partners. Like, if they want to do that, that's fine. But this shouldn't only be about community partners and these proposals that are still out there.
It's not.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because
It's not.
that got a little muddy just now. And I also hope that when you talk about community engagement, you're going to go to neighborhood associations and, that sort of thing. Those are community people that need to be involved in their neighborhood schools. Yeah, one thing I'd like you to think about is, what do you mean by curating a list? Who's going to curate this list of potential partners? And I don't know if you necessarily have an answer for that right now, but who's going to be curating this list, and what are the parameters for that? And are we planning, we got over $100 million worth of proposals, and I don't see why we should spend that much money on other organizations doing our work. Are we committed that most of the ESSER 3 money is going to be based on district priorities and district decision-making rather than sending it out to somebody else?
So no commitment has been made on the expenditure of the ESSER $3 to any community partner. And so we're not today supposing that 100% of the dollars be allocated or 0% be allocated. It's a process that we plan on going through that would include the curated list. So for instance, Ms. Belcher talked about the EL curriculum. So there's been a lot of research, a lot of effort on the district's part to determine the appropriate ELA curriculum, which is EL. It's going through a pilot program now, assuming that the pilot program proves to be effective, which preliminary results indicate that they are, that program is effective. And then that would be on the curated list of curriculum that our schools would be expected to use, as opposed to saying that we have a need over here to improve reading, and we're going to go collect, develop our own curriculum. So this will be that curated list, approved list, if you will, of what. So that's part of the system part.
Ms. Green, I think you started to ask a question.
No, I don't.
You're good?
I didn't.
Okay. Ms. Waters?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify too, just for the benefit of the audience, because we kind of keep hearing one side of things, that all things related to educating and developing children actually don't reside with the school district. The school district handles curriculum, it handles nutrition, it handles the buildings, etc. But we have to go outside to folks who do work like reading partners or engaging creative minds or whatever, you name it, other organizations. You actually cannot expect the school district, which specializes in very specific things, to do all. That does not mean that principals don't need money to go directly into their schools, but we do have to leverage community resources. And a great example of this that really benefits children of color is that during COVID, when districts could not reach families because we didn't have phone numbers, we didn't walk their communities, organizations in their communities, churches, created pods to help those schools. So if we said we don't want to give, whatever AME church money to help when we really need it, then we've missed an opportunity. We have got to get off of this like partisan line of like, we don't want any help, the school district only. It doesn't work. And I think that if people recognize that there is a place for community organizations, even those that may not be your favorite, then we could actually all work together to create solutions and stop sort of this static around who gets to have a seat at the table. Because whether we want to identify them as this or not, nonprofits, CBOs, they are our community as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's a lot of information. So any other questions? Lauren, Joyce, any questions from you guys or input? All right, anything else under SEC? Ms. Herderick?
Nope, we're all done. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Kennedy, Ms. Belcher, Dr. Taylor.
Okay, no. Sounds like you have a helper there. Next item is other committees, other board committees, so audit and finance. Ms. Green, do you want to talk about that or?
Well, it's, we have, and I can't pull the agenda up because I'm on Zoom and y'all are doing technical things to me. But anyways, there are a couple of items that are going to come to you at the board meeting for approval, and the other items, of course, are for information. So we are not asking for any action on these items. I don't think so today. And it's just typical that, they're listed there. If anybody has any questions about them, you can ask now, or you have until the next board meeting.
So, Mrs. Green, if I may, since I can see it, I can tell the board that there's going to be a vote on a D1 contractual matter. You're going to be asked to make that decision. You're going to be asked to make a decision on a contractual matter in the District 9 area. And you're also going to be asked to vote on the 2022 bond anticipation notes, as well as the fixed cost of ownership for next school year, those projects. And you can find that information about those items in the audit and finance section of your board docs.
Actually, I thought that was all there, so I didn't.
It is.
Okay.
It is. Okay, any other questions about that? All right, the other business legislative update.
Are we to assume the document you sent us, Dr. Taylor, is the?
No,
for the
hold
update?
on, Daryl. Oh, Daryl has got it. Give us that. Oh, you're on
Okay.
mute, Dr. Dean. There you go. Hold on 1 second. We're having a little technology.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, good. I think maybe that's my own headphones. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank y'all. So the General Assembly is going into their 6th week of session, and there's been considerable activity in the legislature on public education issues and things like school choice options and education scholarship accounts, the budget and funding of those initiatives. So public education has been a focal point here in Columbia as of late. The bills we're watching closely are H 4879, the Parental Choice and Education Scholarship Fund, and S 935, the Education Scholarship Accounts. Both are moving pretty swift throughout the process. Actually, H 4879 passed out of the House committee in about 48 hours. So it's pretty swift pace we're seeing. And we could see, that legislation be passed as soon as this week in the House. The key discussion of both bills has kind of been eligibility criteria, what is covered in the cost of scholarship, tuition, textbooks, and fees, and some of the discussion is centered around, do you cover the cost of transportation and lunch? Both bills are pilot programs. The House bill only covers K through 6th grade, and the Senate is still debating actually on which grades they'll be covering. But the other criteria they've been discussing a lot is accountability, terms of assessments. The House bill doesn't clarify. I think the Senate has nailed down an amendment that those students enrolled should take some assessments as public school students. Non-discriminatory language to include religion and sex was adopted in the House bill unless it's a single gender school. The Senate also added religion, but discussion is ongoing about students with disabilities. So funding of the scholarship accounts, which of the House bill appropriates about $75 million from the State Contingency Reserve Fund and surplus revenue, but not from the general fund. This ensures that the local school district, allocation is not impacted if students choose the private school option. The Senate will be deliberating this week about how they're going to fund the scholarships, but those discussions are still ongoing. There's actually another meeting for S 935 again this week, so we will keep y'all updated. As far as open enrollment legislation goes, that's something else we're tracking closely is S 544, which allows students to attend schools outside of their attendance zone or another school district. The bill specifies that federal and state funding would allow the student to travel outside the school district, and that funding would follow them. But it does not specify on what happens to be local funds. So they're still having close discussions with that as well. I don't think the bill is up for hearing this week, but we will keep y'all posted. Lastly is critical race theory legislation. It was a pretty packed house committee meeting about 2 weeks ago. They didn't take any testimony then. They kind of just discussed in a full committee. And there's several bills that they're discussing, and they're trying to figure out if they're going to commence with those individually or actually package them all in as one large bill. But they're still in talks with that, and they're going to have another committee hearing this week and take testimony from Superintendent Molly Spearman. So that's what we've been tracking closely, and I'll take any questions you all may have.
All right, any questions? Dr. Frazier.
This might not be a question for you, but I've had some conversation with the legislator about our role as a district and how we are relating to our local delegation. Mr. Kennedy, I think that might be a question for you. While I'm interested in what we're doing at the state level, and we're talking about legislative updates, are we engaging our local delegation here and assisting us and communicating with them?
Can we see if Gerald wants to, because we're really asking questions of him first. So he may be talking with our delegation. Can we ask Gerald first? And then, and then
someone answer the question. I have a right to ask.
Yeah.
Whoever want to answer it.
So let me ask.
Doesn't matter to me.
All right, Mr. Kennedy's going to answer.
So let me ask Dr. Taylor to lead this part of it in terms of her response for the district as well as our representative.
Thank you. So actually just this past week, we asked Mr. Campbell and his team to pull together relevant legislation as it relates to Charleston County School District specifically. And he provided his recommendations, like per piece of legislation with the recommendation would be based upon where the legislation was, House, Senate, with reading and things of that sort. And so a number of the pieces of legislation, actually all of them, his recommendation was at this point for us to continue, us as an administration, and then for the board to continue to monitor. However, he is paying attention, he is watching, and he says at such time that he thinks that as a board, the board should take action to actively lobby, if you will, on a piece of legislation or not, he will let us know. He's been in contact with Ms. Reed, who's over the legislative advocacy committee as well, and has articulated that. And so at this point, that's the reason why we send updates every week, is so that we know that he is monitoring, that at such time that it's time for us to do something, he will let us know. Does that answer your question, Dr. Frazier?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
My question is, are you interfacing with our local delegation, sir?
So during my time that I've been, you asking me or you asking
whoever can answer the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I know that Daryl is actively talking to our local legislative delegation. As far as communicating with them, as far as communicating with them in regards to the recommendations that Dr. Taylor just described, I don't think he is communicating with them and making recommendations based off of any conversations he may have with them. It's more so to get sort of to update them on what bills are in play and to sort of get the gist of where they are on the legislation, more so than developing recommendations specifically for CCSD.
Okay, Well,
Does that make
just let
sense?
me make a, just let me, make a suggestion that we assign someone to interface with our local delegation. This is not just coming from the top of Helen Frazier's head, but there is a need for us as a district to communicate with our local delegation and interact with them on a monthly basis, bi-monthly basis, or whatever we decide to do. They're asking us to do that. I think we ought to follow through with that. That's the only point that I want to make.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions about the report? Yeah.
Mr. Butler, is it still the case that public hearing for the 5 bills related to racial equity and CRT are going to be held on the 16th? For the
Yes, that's
opportunity
Wednesday.
for the public to give testimony.
That's the day.
Yes,
Okay.
that will be on Wednesday. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any other questions or input? Thank you, Dr. Frazier.
I was just gonna follow up on Dr. Frazier. I think that Ms. Green is our legislative liaison, so she would probably be the point person, correct?
She is, yes.
She is. Are
She is.
y'all communicating with her at all? Are y'all communicating with our board member liaison at all?
I believe Daryl is, yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Daryl and Dr. Taylor and I meet on a regular basis. And if there are any thoughts about how we, I don't think it's necessarily our responsibility to follow through necessarily on the local delegation, but we have had some conversation, the 3 of us, about meetings with the legislative delegation, the Charleston legislative delegation, on a regular basis, just to, meet and greet, kind of talk to them. And we just never, scheduled that. If the board feels that is something we should do, we certainly can make that happen, but it would be with the input and participation of all board members. So if that
Thank
is
you. I
something,
don't think the board knew that you were having these conversations or banting around these ideas. I think it would be nice to talk about that with the board.
yeah, Daryl and Erica and I have been talking about these bills, and we've had several discussions about when and how, especially with the with our last meeting with the legislative delegation. So if that is the wish of the board, if you would let me or Ms. Taylor know, we will try to get a meeting scheduled with the legislative delegation.
Thank you.
I just would
Yeah,
like to know that they're having these
So
conversations.
I just
about
want to be clear
Well,
that,
I didn't know that we were necessarily, anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We've talked about them in these meetings, but go ahead, Reverend Mack.
yeah. So I just want to be clear that we are communicating to our delegation every month, correct?
We are?
We are sending updates to them. We are sending.
What are we, can the rest of the board see what's
Wait,
being sent?
Reverend
Hey,
Mack has the
yeah,
floor.
Let me, so I don't want anyone to think that we're sending anything outside of what the board has already discussed. The same updates that we receive as board members, those things are being communicated to the delegation. Am I correct?
Yes,
Okay, so the delegation is getting monthly updates on whatever board action, the same information that we receive.
Our weekly board briefs, that's
The
what you're
delegation,
referencing?
not board brief, but they're getting a monthly update of what we and consume of what we get, the same information. So I just want to be
legislative.
clear that we are communicating to the delegation. And if there's anything specific that we're not addressing to the delegation, we would like to know that if it's outside of us not have been shared with Dr. Taylor or through the superintendent's office, because we made a conservative effort to make sure that we are communicating that information from our 2 years ago December meeting that we had with the delegation. So if that's not happening, but we're being told that it is, so I mean, we need to make sure, because I don't want us to leave here today And then, we get all these different calls from the delegation saying that, we're not getting any information at all, but those information are being shared. So, but if there's anything in addition to what's being shared, then let's make that known so that we can get them that additional information, because we want to make sure that we are sharing the updates on the monthly basis.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Mack. Okay. Looks like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the policy ABD and the Heritage Keepers items will go on the regular part of the board agenda, and the academic calendar will go on the consent agenda of the February board meeting.
No, I thought the February board meeting was when we decided on which calendar to pick.
Yeah.
That's what she was
Okay,
saying.
that is true. So, well, they'll come back with a different action item for us based on the community input. So, okay, so that won't be on the consent agenda. Got it. So all three will be on the regular agenda. All right, and then I have asked Reverend Mack to do one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Share something with us, but also just check your agenda for the upcoming board meeting. So Reverend Mack.
So this, just briefly, we just want to remember two of our board members who have experienced loved ones that have passed away. We want to keep in our prayers Miss Waters. I'm sorry, Miss Coakley. I looked at Miss Waters in the corner of my eyes. Yeah. And my apologies to Ms. Coakley in her experience and bereavement that she has experienced. And we also want to remember Ms. Green in her bereavement process as well, that they both have recently experienced in the past couple of days and weeks. And just want to take a moment for us to pause for a moment and remember and keeping them lifted up in prayer during their hour of bereavement. And gracious Father, we just ask that you continue to cover them with the anointing of your Holy Spirit and give them strength and guidance as they go through these upcoming days and as they continue to move forward in their lives. Bless Ms. Coakley and Ms. Green and their entire family during these days. We thank you now in Jesus' name, for Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Reverend Mack, and our thoughts and prayers are with both of our board members who've experienced loss. Do we have any other items for discussion? All right, can I have a motion to adjourn? All right, meeting adjourned.